Hope was conceived in the womb of God's glory. Tearing through the void, the formless dark void, making room for a beautifully scripted story. The voice of its creator, an invitation, divine, sublime, an opportunity to let it be, and it is good. And now all things, all that is and all that will be, is brought under the dominion of hope's good rule. A destiny of beauty, tranquility, and communion, humanity, divinity, and image-bearing union. Provision, protection, a trajectory of perfection until hope encounters complexity, transgression. Now, hope's good intent for unbroken harmony is met by the willful plague of pride and idolatry. A rupture of peace and bonds now shattered. Hope meets its threat of all that once mattered. And now humanity, with its back turned towards hope's radiant beauty, marches blindly and dangerously close to all that is empty, death's void, a future in question, a pit of despair. Will hope waver in the moment with no hope of repair? And so we linger there and we wonder if we dare. Are we destined for that same snare? And so with eyes fixed we stare at the gaping pit of despair. What will hope's response be? Or will it even care? Or will hope's good news be what we thought it would be? Withheld, elusive, and rare. But hope is not fickle or easily discouraged, for hope is not inspired by fleeting thoughts and momentary plans. No, hope isn't uneasily done by broken circumstances or the failures of man. Hope is not naive or weak or prone to emotional distress. It may weep and grieve and lament, but hope will not rest, because hope has a direction, an unwavering commitment to correction. Hope is not some utopian ideal or wishful thinking, because hope is anchored in the character of the one whose heart is hope's inspiration, and that character is unrelenting, unfailing, and erupting with passion. And hope, now discovering that things are not as they should be, gets busy, springs to action to restore what ought to be, reclaiming a vision, inciting a mission, selecting those to commission for the purposes of restoration and healing a world made right, threatened but not overcome by evil's dread might. Because hope has a revolution at hand. Because hope's inspiration is the great I am and not the schemes of any man. And that I am is free to be who he chooses to be. Unlimited, uncreated, unrestrained, refusing to be named, the one who wields both power and love as though his love is his power. Truth and compassion as though truth is compassion in action. His arm is mighty, his hand is steady, his love enduring, his desires unchanging. His character is hope's ultimate grounding. And it will not fail, because its eternal promises throughout history resounding. His grace, his mercy, his steadfast love abounding. Hope has an anchor in the character of the one unyielding. But where does that bear out in a world like ours that's unraveling? Hope is not a dream or a fairy tale told To the weary and worn out masses whose lives have been sold out to delusional thinking and myths of grandeur, no, hope has a story tried and true, recounted in the chronicles of God's good word for you. And those stories have been preserved for encouragement and strength to overcome fear and despair. But it's got to be read at length. Because wrapped up in its pages are the promises of hope, erupting, revealing, inspiring, empowering, throwing us into the stories of God where His faithfulness is towering over every struggle and strain that tries to lay claim and restrain and shame and try to keep us locked up in despair's shackles and chains. But our story will have nothing to do with it. So I dare you, open it up and peer in, and it will awaken you to a world of possibility. Lives of hope, agents of hope, put on display for all to see. Hope won't leave us alone because it's headed in a direction toward God's redemptive intention, toward God's claim of possession, toward humanity's liberation, towards the world's reclamation, towards God's bountiful provision, towards God's great declaration that all is good again. So I dare you, open the pages and peer in, and you will find a revolution. A world where tired, worn-out, old, retired men like Abraham are called to find his place in love's grand solution. Sent out into the world with nothing more than a promise. Facing discouragement, he holds on to the belief that every life that God calls tills the soil to plant the seed of humanity's relief. And you need to understand that hope is no stranger to evil's insidious and corrupt desires. And it can lay fallow for days, weeks, months, years. Or it can even feel mired in the opposition of oppression, domination, exclusion, exploitation, manipulation, and destruction. But the burning glow of hope's bright light cannot be extinguished. And when that fire ignites a wilderness bush that won't be consumed, shoeless shepherds become agents of freedom to the despairing and the doomed. And hope will stand with courage in front of obstacles like seas, with the enemy breathing down, threatening to bring us to our knees. But hope lifts up and it slices way through our no way, marches us on dry ground, vanquishing our enemy without delay. Hope will guide us through the wildernesses of our worry and uncertainty, our insecurity and vulnerability, our timidity and rigidity. And hope reminds us that every day will be met with enough provision and protecting, sustaining us no matter how rough. See, hope is headed in a direction toward God's promised land of favor and grace. Hope reminds us of God's steady hand in place after place. Hope believes that walls can crumble with a march and a shout, and that our God can preserve us no matter life's drought. And in Hope's story, weakling men from weakling clans like Gideon become mighty warriors who bring down armies even though outmanned. And hope can stand and laugh in the face of our giant's Goliath. Even though others are shaking in their armor, turn tail and run, hope, armed with only a rock and a sling, can bring down that giant and stun all those who are watching in amazement at the victory bells that hope can ring when the least become greatest, the weak become strong, and shepherd boys are crowned king. Now hope, it'll journey with us even into our exiles. Those places where all hope feels lost, it becomes an enduring friend even when the aspirations of change feel tossed out the window, trampled underfoot and crushed in the dust. See, hope emboldens young boys in the flickering flames of the fiery furnace to refuse to bow down, pay homage, or succumb to evil's power to discourage. Hope will have us standing in the den of all of our lions of all shapes and sizes, snarling and scowling, chop-licking and prowling. Hope believes that God can clench those teeth and domesticate those beasts. Hope inspires preachers and prophets and sometimes even priests to remind us of God's resilience and his desire for peace. But hope's story is not over with old men and shepherd boys and flooded lands and outmanned clans, or a few unlikely battles won, or a day in which the sun stood still, refusing time's passage. No, hope has a commitment to a world made right. And it won't rest until all darkness has been expelled by the light of God's faithful, favor-filled goodness, grace and love, glorious embrace. Hope will not rest until we are no longer languishing in our disgrace, of our shame and our sin, of our guilt and our judgment, of our brokenness and bondage, addiction, discouragement, failure, regret, bad decisions, and broken dreams. No, hope has no talent, will not give up and give in, because it will not stop until all to a way has been made. Evil has been laid to rest, until humanity has learned to accept God's best. Oh, but hope, in order to overcome darkness's reluctant retreat, hope has to go over the top and take to the street. See, hope not only has a character, an anchor, a direction and story, hope has a name. Poised on the promises of the prophets, the people prayed passionately, calling out for God's favor to be poured out in abundant provision, but they had no idea what God's answer to their plea would be. That God's pouring out would be himself pouring himself into a body, a peculiar vessel into a peasant couple's hands, a little baby boy in whose presence the forces of darkness struggled to stand. Hope's decisive moment came at a glorious expense, that the Father's Son would condescend, come low, destroying the fence that exists between the sacred and secular, the graced from the low, the up above from the here below. And hope would wrap itself in the skin of man, and he would travel the land, and he would stand among the weak and the weary, the broken, the bruised, the battered, and the forsaken, and the people would flock even as the demons ran. For hope is now covered in the skin of a Savior whose sole mission was to put on full display the Father's favor. Hope had come low and made his home amongst us, calling us, inviting us to embrace him and trust in redemption's high calling, in liberating promises, in sin's grasp being broken, and no more lives being stolen. See, hope has a name. His name is Jesus. An unlikely candidate for a world revolution. A carpenter's son from an faraway place. Could this be some delusion? And hope surrounds itself with an unlikely conspirators for this collusion, misfits and vagabonds, vagrants and ragamuffins. This is the revolution, and yet it makes an announcement that the kingdom come, that the Father's will would be done, embodied in a Son, an offer of grace that some would still shun. But to others, that grace would pierce that steel-plated heart, self-protective, not wanting to be let down. And when that happens, a groundswell starts. The left outs are let in. The shamed and disgraced will find places of graces amidst the without traces of judgment on the face of hope. It's a good news towards the lowly, the least, the broken, the hurting, the struggling, because for them, hope has a name, a face, a body, a voice who's calling and embracing. Hope has a name, Jesus, Messiah and Savior, the promise of the Father, the provision of favor. But not all would buy into eternity's blessing. Some would see it a threat to their holiness, which, mind you, is nothing more than window dressing. See, Jesus had called them into his arms, but all they could imagine that their religious reputation now harmed, alarmed, they conspired to crush it, to bring an end to hope before they could no longer control it. And so evil's plan is hatched out in the hearts of self-righteous religion to bring an end once and for all to redemption's glorious mission. And now hope, caught in a snare, tried under trumped-up charges, stood seemingly powerless, soon to become the carnage of violence, injustice, abuse, and torments. Hope had now found its way amongst all of the victims of mistreatment. And hope was stripped naked and forced up a hill, and it fell under the crushing weight of humanity's perfect, perverted will. Nails were fixed to the hands and the feet of hope's messenger, now held down to ensure that the status quo remain unscathed, and evil, with the help of dastardly men, took hope and raised him above the people where he's mocked and ridiculed and jeered. Its promise and power, its reputation now smeared. And this hope that has a name struggled to breathe. And even as the forces of darkness celebrated, they seethed in anger over the appalling gall of hope's thought that it could bring an end to all of the work that it had done to keep humanity bound to its failure and fall. And on the cross, the skin of hope now shattered to the fearful dismay of all those that had gathered. Hope had been cut off and severed. And all their dreams had been dashed. Hope would breathe its final breath, vanquished, collapsed. What if perhaps hope has a limit? All those that dared to believe, heads down, they walk away a broken, forlorn exit. But what if? What if hope won't go out like a chump? What if hope won't be put away or ground down like a stump, like a mighty oak tree that has been cut down and tossed into the dump? And what if you can't get away of its remnants in power? Because what if hope was just waiting for the right time and hour? Because what if hope's final breath was not its last? Because what if hope is as faithful now and will be as it was in the past? And what if in death, hope clashed against the forces of darkness and defeated death's grasp through the power of selfless love and faithfulness that can't be held down, not when it's embodied in the Father's heavenly Son. Evil and death can try as they will, but still hope has the power to fill every faraway place and void and empty space with the light of God's grace. And what if hope that once hung from a cross is now rattling around in a tomb? And what if the full measure of hope's power is about to bloom, bursting forth like a flower, unfolding its petals in the spring, bringing an end to winter, death, darkness, and the cold weather sting, announcing it can't be bound up and shut off and cast out and closed off for too long, for the power and the love of God is just that strong. So hope takes a breath and blows open a tombstone stone, and as the light rushes in, heaven's inhabitants or hell's inhabitants moan loudly. The realization that their greatest attempts to hold down God's favor had now been thwarted. They knew what that meant. And hope, whose name is Jesus, reemerged from death's door, and he makes the announcement, you got no idea what God has in store. For though evil and sin and death may try desperately to destroy hope in vain to hell's disdain, Jesus makes it plain that no matter the pain, God will sustain, and hope will wash away the stain, even as hope is risen from the dead where it was lain. Because hope always outpaces evil's design. Because hope has been the faithful posture of God throughout all of time. And hope will not fail you when it's anchored in Jesus, because even in the end, he comes to lay claim over us. So hope has an anchor, direction, a story, and a name. And I can assure you that if you unwrap it and embrace it, it will no longer be the same.